A very scary moment happened for Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal in the past days. A man, a presumably deranged man, a lunatic, went outside of her house and was screaming racist and threatening things, threatening to kill her, as well as we're about to look at here, making it about her being someone who immigrated here as a kid. And so he was found to have a gun outside of her house, and that, combined with him saying he wanted to kill her, makes for a very frightening situation. So luckily, she did call the police, and she ended up being okay, but super, super scary. If you're not familiar with Pramila Jayapal, she's a progressive congresswoman and a Democrat, obviously. All right. Reading from the Washington Post. On Saturday night, Jayapal called 911 to report someone outside her home using obscene language and who may have fired a pellet gun, according to a probable cause statement from Seattle police obtained by King 5 News. According to the statement, police found outside a 48-year-old man, Jayapal's home, who was standing in the middle of the street with his hands in the air and a 40 caliber Glock 22 handgun holstered on his waist. So the unknown part was the pellet gun thing. That's what made them presumably, one of the things they thought they noticed was pellets being shot at their house. That's one thing. But then once the police actually got there, they realized he had a 40 caliber Glock on him. A neighbor told the police she heard the suspect yell something like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sick of this." Something like, "Go back to India, I'm going to kill you." I don't know why that's hitting me a lot right now. And that she had seen the suspect drive by Jayapal's house 3 times while yelling profanities, according to the statement. The man was arrested shortly before midnight Saturday, police said. They said the man told them that he knew who lived at the residence and wanted to pitch a tent on the property, the statement said. So I had read this article already, but for some reason reading that quote, "Go back to India, I'm going to kill you," is really hitting me right now. So obviously, first off, before we get into my specific feelings on that part of it, just knowing that someone is outside of your house with a gun who's screaming that they want to kill you is incredibly terrifying. And I think people have a misconception that Congress people are well protected because they're people in power. And we, of course, see like the president and even senators have security. But a lot of these Congress people who are constantly demonized by the right, a lot of these progressive congresswomen specifically, they don't have security. And I'm scared every day for people like Jayapal, for people like AOC, Ilhan Omar, all these people who have been made, such figures for what the right hates and demonizes. And so it's so frightening to me that they don't have proper security to keep them safe. And she's sitting there with her husband, with her family. I don't know the specifics of her family, but point is, she's at home where you should feel safe, and someone's out there with a 40 caliber Glock saying he wants to kill you with the means to do so. Incredibly scary. So obviously, as I said, police ended up getting him, and Pramila Jayapal and her family are okay. But you can't imagine how scary that is when you know the sentiment that a lot of these crazy people have for individuals like Jayapal. So then to the specific thing about the "go back to India," right before he said, "I'm going to kill you." This is why we criticize as progressives and push back against people like Tucker Carlson, people like Donald Trump, and all of these right-wingers who constantly make it this us versus them when it comes to people who either were not born here or even just people who were born here but look different than what they think of as the good American archetype. It really matters, and it has consequences to the point where this guy feels justified and feels in his right to believe that just because someone immigrated here, I think for Pramila Jayapal is at age 16, they have no less right to be a member of our society and be a representative of our country. If you go through our process, which is very extensive to become a citizen, holy smokes. If you have ever looked at it, I had a person close to me in my life who immigrated and went through a long process to become a legal citizen. And it is extensive. I promise you, a lot of the citizenship tests that they take to become citizens have a lot of questions that native-born Americans would not know. Plus, it's just constant round after round of these checks before you actually become a citizen. So if you go through all of that, then heck yeah, you're an American and you have a right to be here. And for her, how amazing of a story is that? She comes here at 16, I think it said for educational purposes, and then rises all the way up to be a congresswoman. working to try to make the lives of her constituents better, hopefully. And in her case, she does push for really good policies that would be beneficial to her constituents. And so the idea that someone would hold the opinion of that person doesn't have a right to be here and that person should go back to the country they were born in is just disgusting. And I'm genuinely so sick and tired of it. And y'all know me. I'm super optimistic about the future most of the time, and I'm super willing to give people the benefit of the doubt and like try to see the best in Americans, even the ones that I disagree with a lot. But this is where I get so viscerally enraged. The idea that people like Jayapal and countless others who exist in our society, most of them honestly didn't even move here this generation, but even if they look like it, if they look like someone who isn't, as Tucker Carlson calls, a legacy American, which is just a massive racist dog whistle, then they hear sentiments like this expressed. And all of those videos that go viral of what people call Karens, but just people harassing others out in public for no reason, it seems like half of the time they go immediately to go back to your country, or you're not a real American, or whatever. And it makes you realize how many people walk around in our country and see others who don't look like them as less than, purely because they don't look like them. And so that's where I get just so upset. I'm going to read the quote to you again one more time. Quote, "Go back to India. I'm going to kill you." He wants to kill her because she came to America to try to live that American dream that we're so proud of. And she pretty much did it. Came here, she went through all of what she went through, worked hard, and became a congresswoman. That should be amazing. Regardless of if you support her policies specifically or if you would vote for her, I think everyone can recognize that's an amazing story. But no, other people see it as not being a real legitimate American or whatever. And it's disgusting. And I'm so sick of it. I'm so tired of people feeling like they can express this point of view without being completely outcasted from our society. I promise you, or I want you to know, I guess is a better way to put it, that you are proving yourself to be not as American as everyone else who you probably look down upon whenever you express the opinion that someone else is less than you purely because of where they were born, purely because of the way that they look. Because I was just listening to a historical breakdown walking through the rise of America and the founding and everything that led up to it, and then the years after. And let me tell you, one of the things that makes America unique is the fact that, as it said in this podcast I was listening to, America was invented. It was one of the rare countries that was invented. Do you know what I mean by that? People got there and started a new idea, a new concept, rather than it being a long line of historical peoples that developed and changed, and one nation formed and then the next, and it fell and a new one developed. People arrived here. Of course, we know the devastation that happened because we arrived here, but people arrived here and came up with a new concept of a nation that they wanted to create out of thin air. And that invention of the country we now know as the United States of America came from a bunch of people who immigrated here. Obviously not through a process like immigrating to a formalized country, but they traveled looking for a better life, and then they built one. They built a country so that they could have a better life right here. And then all throughout our history, that's how America grew to be what it is now. It's a bunch of people who came from faraway places, sometimes not that far away, but from other places to America, trying to live the American dream, trying to find that truth within the promise that America kept making. And that's what made America what it was. And that's what makes us so unique in our process becoming who we were, or who we are. And so Pramila Jayapal is a beautiful example of that American story. And lunatics like this man who was outside her house could not be more un-American in their view of the world.